Yeah. So just so everybody's aware, this is going to be recorded. So those who want to dash out of the room because they don't want to be on camera, now is your time. Right. Okay, let's look at the agenda first for this evening, folks. So I think we have some guests here, and I think, how many guests do we have online? I don't think we have any guests online, right? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, so just guests in the room. So we have a little tradition here where we would like guests to just introduce themselves, just say who you are, what you do, and then we can welcome you in that way. So we look forward to that. We're then going to do some chapter updates. There's a few little bits of news we want to convey. We're going to postpone the student spotlight for this month. As you know, normally we have a section where we introduce some of Professor Dan's great student population, especially those who are coming up on closer to graduation. So we're going to start those up again next month, right? Which is perfect. Program summary, I'm going to get Derek to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about membership as well. It's actually not on here, but we'll get Alan to do that. Just see where everybody is. Right, and then we're going to have a great session. The session tonight is going to be on data analytics and data management. When I first saw this topic, I thought, isn't that just business intelligence? No, that's your granddad's data analytics, right? So I am going to learn a lot. I hope you guys learn a lot. We've got a really good panel of experts who, subject matter experts in this area. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. So first of all, I just want to thank our sponsors this evening, Sigma Computing. They're also going to be working the panel with us. So thank you so much, guys. Really, really, really appreciate all the effort you've helping us out. Can we please show our appreciation for Sigma? Thank you very much. Very good. Okay, so guests. Who is a guest this evening? All right, so here's a mic. This is for the benefit of Zoom rather than the, so I'm just going to spin the camera around 1 second. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, I think you are on. There you go.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
My name is Russ Bucklew. I am a fundraiser with W.P. Carey School of Business. I walked about a half a block here to get here.
Go on, put some effort in. Go
on. And I brought my W.P. Carey backpack.
All right.
I've been wanting to meet Dan. I'm a guest of Derek Brunel, who exercises with me almost every morning. And he talks a lot about this group and how engaged you are and forward thinking and all of the great information that he's learning and the networking and so forth. So I'm very pleased to be a guest, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Welcome.
Whenever I do something like this, I always like to say a fun fact about myself that nobody knows. So
you know the routine already.
Were you going to ask me that?
Yeah. So, well, usually new members we do, right?
Oh, okay.
So, but you're getting ahead of the game. That's very good. Go on, tell us a fun fact.
So I was born in France.
Excellent.
There you go.
Très bon. You guys can introduce yourselves later. Who else do we have? Yes. Let me just stick you on camera. All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denny Donofrio. This is my second event. I was able to join you all in November, so thanks for having me back. Guest of Troy Curtis's. I am a PMO manager at Worldwide Technology, based here in Phoenix, and alumni as well. So 2009 CIS and WP Carey. So cool. Good to be back on campus.
Thanks. Do you want to just hand that over to them?
Hey everybody, Colin Graves. I'm the founder of North Labs, actually a guest of the Sigma folks today, so appreciate the warm welcome from everyone. North Labs is a data architecture and engineering firm, so we help organizations with their cloud-based architecture and engineering transformation. roadmaps. We're an early partner of Sigma, top partner in the Midwest for AWS, nominee for Emerging Partner of the Year with Snowflake. I'm based down here now. The company is still headquartered in Minneapolis, but yeah, I'm a Penn State dropout. So
Yay!
hopefully that doesn't taint the welcome too badly, but pleasure to be here with you all.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Roper. I am here as a guest with Michael Paradise. He found me on LinkedIn. I'm an unemployed IT manager right now. I was with Nationwide Insurance for 20 years, and in 2020, they did some job eliminations, and mine was one of them. So I'm here. This is my first event, just here to check things out and see how things are going and what I can do to continue my career somewhere.
Well, welcome, and certainly good luck in your search, for sure. Okay. All right. Okay, we're going to talk about some board updates.
Hey, Simon.
Yes, sir.
I'm not new, but I want to say hello to the group again.
Yes, Jim, do so, please. Yeah.
So my name is Jim Haskin. I've been a member of SIM for a very long time. Was a member of this chapter and tried to participate, and then I dropped out for about 2 years to go run another business, and completely not in the IT space. And then in early January, I took over as the Chief Information Officer at Flex Technology Group. So I'm back in the game and back in the IT world and trying to remember what that looks like. So
Welcome back.
I wanted to rejoin, re-engage, and become part of the group again. So
Jim, we're thrilled to have you back. Thrilled.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so some board updates. So the fact that I'm stood here says one thing, right? So, so as you know, I was the president until a year ago, and I serve as past president. But with Bipin moving on, his company got acquired. He's got a huge portfolio on his plate. He had to step back. I said I would take over as interim president again. But of course, we are still looking for a potential replacement. But if all else fails, I'm here for at least a year, right? Because that's the rest of my that's the rest of my term anyway, right? Also, the other announcement is that Dan Conzen, who most of you know is our treasurer, has been long associated with us and on the board. He's also finding difficulties with balancing a very busy career, and I think he's involved in 4 different companies with his duties here. So we are looking for a treasurer. So anybody you know, or yourselves, or any of the members that you know who you think would make a good treasurer, who won't fiddle the books, that would be fabulous. All right, so those are those. All right, membership. It is that time. So I'm going to ask Alan just to say a little bit just to update people about, because maybe some people aren't familiar with the timing and I'm just going to stick you on. Yeah.
So I'm the director of membership, Alan Dunn, if you guys don't know me. The membership renewal process kicked off last October, went through the end of the year. The good news is if you're a member from 2021 and still have not renewed, you still have time. They let the membership stay active until the end of March. So just reach out to me if you have any questions. I know some people, if you're in transition or COVID's hit you really bad, don't give up on SIM if you really want to be a part of it. We have some programs and plans that we can help keep you involved. I know there's several people that I'm still working with to get that process through to the finish line. So working with SIM National on that, but I'm kind of the go-to person for any membership questions you have. I also want to put a plug out there. If you know any organizations that you think might be good or interested in enterprise membership, that's really something we want to push. It's something that I think provides a lot of value. Right now, one of the big things in the IT world is trying to retain good people. And I think providing value by helping people be a part of an organization like this, we have some enterprise members here tonight. So I think there's a lot of value in that, investing in your employees and giving them an opportunity to be a part of a group like this. And now that we have the virtual and in person, it gives you the chance to participate even more. So I'm pretty excited about what we can do with this new format. So
Great. Thanks so much. Thank you, sir. Actually, we didn't really rehearse this particular thing, but I'm going to say, because this I think this hybrid format, I think works pretty well, I hope, right? And I think this potentially opens up some new opportunities for us as a chapter, because we are Sim Arizona, we're not Sim Phoenix or Scottsdale. So if, one thing we've been discussing at a board level, and I'd like you guys as the membership to sort of mull this over, but do you think we could start maybe some satellite groups within Arizona, right? Who could be part of these kind of events and be part of our team? Maybe an office in Tucson, a satellite in Tucson, maybe Flag or whatever, right? So just a thought there from having this kind of hybrid working, which could turn out to be a distinct advantage, I think. Great. We have got some great programs lined up for us, and we're very, very pleased to have Derek look after that for us. So I am going to ask Derek to just take us through that. You can actually, yeah,
excellent. Can everyone hear me okay online?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So one of the goals this year is to really speak to the membership in terms of the things that they've asked for topics. And so the first topic that we have, obviously today, data analytics and data management. We're following up with an online event, right, to kind of rehash and go through data analytics again. So coming up on January 26th, that'll be Zoom only, and Anuya will be managing that. In February, we have business transformation, and we have Laura Hemingway. Laura, if you don't mind standing up for a quick moment. Laura is a distinguished member, has been a member of SIM for quite some time. And
just stand, that's fine. There, yep.
I think everybody in the room has been a part of a digital transformation, right? And so Laura's going to walk us through some of the ins and outs, some of the ups and downs and key factors. So that will be a very lively, good event for February. And again, membership speaking to membership. And so that's really what we're looking for. The next one in March, the original topic was going back to work, but very funny, right? So we're talking about the future of work, right? The future of work, it's going to be this hybrid environment. It's going to be sometimes we're there and sometimes we're not there. And we're trying to balance. And so we have TJ who is going to moderate that. TJ, do you mind standing up very quickly? And so those that are in the room will help with the programs and speaking to the membership. So TJ, thank you so much for the February event. And then as we go into April, we're looking at leadership coaching, right? Some of the things that really a lot of companies don't invest a lot in, but as a group, that's part of our mission, right? And so we have Mary Patry. Mary, if you don't mind standing up, please, very quickly here. And so we have membership speaking to membership. Now you're in a leadership position. What do you do, right? What are those things? What are those tips and tricks to help you really lead your team moving forward? And I see a lot of you are intrigued, and so we'll be calling on you. You might hear a text, you might get a LinkedIn message that says, hey, we've got, a June, July, and August, right, program to fill. So I see Brad here smiling. I see some other folks are smiling. So I'll be reaching out. So thank you for the programs. Thank you all for your help for this.
Thank you so much. Great. Appreciate that. Yeah, you can manage that for the audience, right? Great, thanks. Well, that brings us to the main event for the evening, and we're going to talk about data analytics, and we're absolutely thrilled to have a panel of subject matter experts who's going to guide us through this. It's going to be moderated by our good friend Steve Stevens, who is the CTO of Sysazzle, and we obviously know Steve from the chapter. We are joined from our guests from Sigma Computing. We're joined by Zack Tembi and Kristian Fennessy. When I first saw Kristian Fennessy, I thought that, is he related to Rich Fennessy? Who's quite a famous guy in the Valley, right, from cybersecurity, but he's got an extra E, so he's definitely not that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset these chairs because for you guys on Zoom have got good audio because we're piping the mics into Zoom, but for the people in the room, it's ambient voice, right? So I just want to make sure everybody can hear. So I'm going to move the chairs a little bit here so everybody can see, and I'll adjust that. So if you just want to move these chairs down. And I'm going to disconnect this and I'll move this back.
Simon, you're doing a great job of making this functional.
We're winging it, mate. We're winging it. But anyway, I think it's working.
Pick a chair.
Yeah.
Before I move this mic. According to the order I put on the slide.
Yeah. So you guys should be picked up pretty well in on this mic anyway, without necessarily having to hand it over too much, I hope. Guys, if you on Zoom, if you can't hear properly, they can take this mic and pass it around. But perhaps if you can just do some brief introductions of yourselves, and then we'll get going.
Can you hear me in the back? Great. My name is Steve Stevens. I am what Michael calls the Chief Solution Officer for Sysazzle. I think of myself as a value consultant. And here tonight to run around in this large topic called data. With me tonight are two fabulous guests.
Hey, welcome everyone. Zack Tembi here. So I'm a regional director. So I work with a lot of our customers at Sigma here in the Southwest. And just a little bit about myself. So I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut. Went to school in Virginia. Had a stint in Washington D.C. So I spent a number of years there, and then slowly migrated out to San Diego. So I live out in San Diego. I've always been extremely passionate about startup companies. So I've always worked for kind of the next generation of the next analytics for 15 years of my career. So I love just operating, so working at companies, helping them grow. Also dabble in investing, mentoring, advising as well. So I've got an interesting perspective. I talk to a bunch of different companies, and today I'm here as myself, not Sigma Computing. So I love these events because it gives me an opportunity to really give my perspective on what the landscape looks like for analytics.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristian Fennessy, and I'm a data solution engineer at Sigma Computing. And a couple fun facts: I grew up in the Caribbean, in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Went on to do my undergrad at MIT in architecture, actual buildings, not data architecture. And then 7 years ago, I moved out to the West Coast. Now living in San Diego, pursuing a career in data analytics. And so I specialize in cloud architecture, data engineering, and of course, data analytics or business intelligence.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So how many people here have been following sports lately? NFL's been going crazy. Baseball season is over, but it's coming up again. And one of the amazing things about sports that I find is that all of the numbers, the statistics that they have on every player's performance, okay? But for years, for decades, they collected this information and never used it. How many people here saw the movie Moneyball? The value that is in the data analytics. They were collecting that data, they were paying money to collect that data, they didn't know what to do with it until the general manager got into trouble and was willing to listen to an analyst. Changed the game of sports forever. Okay? That's just one example. How many are familiar with the term value chain? Value chain, great. So every company has its own value chain. Some have several. Okay? The data that we need to track needs to support that value chain. And that example with sports was simply that. It's become very, very important. Well, my question first is to get a little bit more perspective on yourselves and what got you interested in data analytics?
Awesome. Yeah, great question, Steve. So coming out of college, I landed a job at a really high growth analytics company. And what got me really excited was just the fact I was working with Fortune 1000 companies, so big banks of the world, retail, and understanding that they're huge companies, there's data in each department, and trying to figure out how do you get value from all this data? How do we make decisions? So just the fact that I could work with an organization and help them create a solution that yields valuable data so that they can make a decision that move the needle for their company, could save them, $30 million or create other revenue streams. So that really excited me that, you could create a solution from technology and make a huge impact on, these large organizations.
And similar to Zach, when I came out of college, I was working at a Big Four consulting company, working primarily with capital projects for large public utilities. And my next opportunity was at a smaller tech company where we were essentially doing business intelligence for governments, where it was basically a cloud solution that would allow them to use a simple interface to essentially do all of their financial planning and accounting reports. And that was really my first foray. And since then, I haven't looked back.
Thank you. Very interesting. So it's just that little bit that lights that fire, that spark that gets people interested and develops that passion to dive into that data. And the interesting part about it, though, is that every company is slightly different. There's many different industries. Those companies are set up differently. So all of them have a use case that's not generic. Do you have any specific industries or use cases or something that really drives that passion that got you all excited?
Yeah, I think for me, it was definitely, well, there's kind of two sides of it. So on just the scale side, so working with, I was working with one of the largest retail companies in the world. So trying to figure out, just the scale of how do we collect a massive amount of data? How do we make sense of it to put it in one place, make sense of it? How do we make it perform it? At that scale where you have terabytes and terabytes of data, petabytes of data, how do you really make sense of it and analyze it? So that's a very, unique problem, I think, for these large companies. But what's really cool about, Kristian and I running around day to day, we work with like a lot of smaller companies. So companies that could have 100 employees. And what the challenging part there is they don't have the resources of an Intel or an American Express. They can't put 100 people on a project. So they, us working with them, it's a challenge, right? Because we're doing it with less resources. But when we reach that, that endpoint where they have a valuable solution, that's super exciting.
Yeah, and I'll say similarly in the scale topic, organizations today are generating and consuming more data than ever before, whether it's your GL transactions or anything transactional, right? If it's your paid ads, if you're a retail store and you're just selling these transactions with a point of sale system, and not everyone today is actually leveraging the massive amounts of data they have, similar to the Moneyball example, right? So I'd say that is really what lights my fire, is just getting people to see like that what they have and collect today is valuable and can turn their dollars into more dollars.
I've done podcasts in the past where talking with people that they were using maybe 5% of the data, a small portion of that. They simply didn't understand how to use the rest of it. But there have been advances in architecture and data storage. Could you please elaborate a little bit on what those changes are and what kind of impact that they've had?
Yeah, I think, the biggest change that I've seen in, 15 years that I've been working with data is the transition to the cloud. So extremely powerful for one reason. As a company, you're able to innovate so quickly and create solutions, test them, validate them, without having to stand up a bunch of infrastructure. I started off early on in my career, spent about five years working with the Department of Defense. So it was all on premises, and to build a solution, it might take 3, 4, 5 months. With the cloud, you log into AWS, you work with a great consulting partner, you're able to get that solution up and running in a matter of hours, days, and see if it works for your business. So I think, the modern cloud stack in the cloud, extremely valuable for the rate that you're able to innovate. The only challenge with the cloud, I think in the manufacturing space, so edge on the endpoint. So if you want to start collecting endpoint data, that's where run into some challenges. But everything else, I think the cloud it makes it so much more easier to evolve your platforms.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. On the agility portion, you have to make decisions at a faster rate than you've ever had to, right? With everything that's happening in the environment from COVID and maybe things that are going on with competitors, acquisitions in the market. You have to make decisions at a really rapid pace. And if you're still using a traditional system, it really makes it difficult to do that. Whereas the move to the public cloud has simply changed the way that applications are built. And that's, yeah, to Zach's point, really the most influential part.
So a quick raise of hands to the audience. How many of you are actually using cloud-based data? Okay, about half. Were you forced into doing that through was the business forcing you to do that, or did you have to drag the business? A show of hands. How many were forced to by budgetary reasons to do that? No? One? Oh, okay. And the rest, you had to drag the company? A lot of nods and smiles. Okay. So that's one of the factors that is extremely important, is having that agility and some of the cost benefits involved with that. But a little bit more about architecture, okay? There's been a lot of new terms, data warehousing, data lakes, data fabrics, all sorts of things. So could you please talk a little bit about, what those terms are and when you would use one or the other?
Yeah, for sure, yeah. So, I mean, a data lake, quite simply, is where most of your data is going to be stored. Typically, it's unstructured, semi-structured. It may even be structured, but typically you're not doing reporting out of there. Now, there's some solutions on the market today that also do data warehousing, which is typically where your business is going to interface with the data. If you're familiar with perhaps team data marts, right, different silos of data that have been organized by business unit. If you're familiar with data modeling, right, the idea of curating data that your company can use, and it's not just sitting in essentially a repository. And again, some of these technologies today have combined now both of these processes by using the public cloud to actually store and compute data. It's actually made it simpler than ever to build up an infrastructure.
When would you use one over the other?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Sounds like a data scientist would prefer one,
right?
The other.
Absolutely. So a data scientist for augmented analytics might be more keen to use a data lake, and they might use tools like Python or notebooks in order to interface with that data. The typical data analyst or line of business user is typically not able to do that. If there's any case where you actually need to structure the data, typically that'll be better done in a data warehouse.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge with that, Steve, for most companies is you want to make this data accessible. Where I see the light bulbs go off is when you create a great analytics platform, and an analyst that is sitting in Bismarck, North Dakota, that is entry level, has some great idea. He's able to access the data directly, do his analysis, and make a game-changing decision for the business, create more revenue. So I think the advances in technology is making data more accessible. So the faster and more compliant way that you could architecture data on the back end and make that accessible for your employees it could yield a lot of results long term.
Fascinating. So the cloud has enabled someone else to worry about setting up the infrastructure and just have it ready for us, right? And now we can collect all of that data and throw it in a big pile, and then have someone go through and organize it and find gold nuggets, sort of like modern day gold panning, if you would.
Yeah, and without the limitations of needing to maintain your own infrastructure, without needing to update your own systems, right? You can typically have your SaaS vendors, right, your cloud vendors, doing that for you, which takes a lot of cost off of you as well as just effort, right?
Right. But here's the question. Here's where the rubber meets the road, and that is, even in the cloud, it costs money. Any business manager is going to say, what's my return on that investment? What do I get at? What are the benefits? Right? If I set up this huge data lake, how is that going to improve the business? How is that going to make things better? Could you kind of touch on what some of the benefits are for that? From a business standpoint, I mean, I'm looking at value, right? I'm a hard-nosed businessman, and I need to make a buck, right?
Oh, wow.
And there's all of this data. Someone wants me to spend money on data.
Sure.
How do I realize that? We saw it in movies, Moneyball and so forth, but how do I get the people that I'm working with to make that?
I think for on the large scale, these large enterprises, I mean, the companies I was working with, they have, $1 billion IT budgets, but they're still very highly scrutinized. And the solutions could be, $10, $20 million a year to build a, proper data warehouse or data lake. It always starts with culture. So it's always a people challenge up front where we when I work with my customers, it's creating a data first culture. And that when you have a problem with the business, you're able to walk to that VP or that CIO and say, here's the data of why we should do this, and creating an ecosystem where it's easier to access that data. Historically, it might have taken a couple weeks to get an answer from the data. So CIO, CEO has a challenge. IT team goes back. They spend a month trying to figure out, okay, let's get these metrics together, consolidate them. Now that they're accessible with a modern data stack, you can get those answers immediately. And that's typically how most technology acquisitions are made. So you're solving a mission critical business problem that affects the business, all the way up to the C-suite, sponsoring that and saying, hey, here's a modern data stack that can help solve a lot of these issues. And as these questions pop up, we can answer them quickly.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a few just examples from the business. Take a marketing team, right? And they want to better understand which of their paid ad channels and campaigns are yielding the most efficient dollars, right? The most efficient amount of revenue and pipeline coming out of that. Or take a finance team who takes a week or two at the end of every quarter, trying to close out their books, trying to do general ledger reconciliation, right? If they had a faster way to do that in just say a day or hours, right? How much more effective could they be? And then maybe take supply chain, right? If anyone tried to order furniture or a car recently, they've probably run into this, or even just watch the news, right? Perhaps you might want to see which of your ports are experiencing labor shortages, right? And these are all questions that can be much more easily answered when transactional level data is actually at the fingertips of the business.
So it's been interesting. Well, maybe that's the wrong word. It's been a challenge in the last 2 years with COVID and everything impacting businesses, impacting supply chains and so forth. And the most interesting thing that they had at the front of it was a dashboard showing the case counts around the world and so forth, that everybody had their eyes glued to, saying, when's it going to hit my neighborhood? Okay. In many businesses and communities that I've consulted in, many of them were struggling to collect that data and then how to store it, how to present it in a timely fashion. Even the federal government was having a hard time collecting that from the hospitals and so forth. Okay, so how long would it take to do a migration from an old style mess that I just illustrated into a modern data architecture so that that information would be readily available?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Steve. So it's literally a matter of 2 weeks, right? Of building the stack, having it be operational. Whereas, historically, like I said, it could take months to actually just build a prototype. You could do it in 2 weeks now, and then that's the easy part, right? Is building that initial solution. The hard part is how do you scale long term? So the major challenge that I've kind of seen, the cloud's great, it's awesome, and you can do innovation very quickly. But I spent a number of years working with clients where they went all in on one cloud, so they went either AWS or Amazon, or they went to Google or Microsoft. And then over time, they started collecting more and more data, and the prices just became astronomical. So now they're in a point where they have to say, okay, how do we operationalize this so it's not as expensive? So I think what goes into that is planning, Steve. So short term, it's easy to build that prototype, but then it's the planning. And when I sit down with a lot of organizations, it's all about prioritizing the data. So your most important data, you want that on your fastest, most responsive storage and compute layer. If you have data that you have to collect for 7 years for compliance reasons, put that on the cheap storage if you're only accessing it, once a year when you have a security incident or something like that. So it's all about prioritizing that data and figuring out over time, how can we keep it cost effective but still performant and responsive.
And just to add on to that, cloud isn't a magic bullet, right? There still has to be, to Zach's earlier point, a data culture that's behind these initiatives, because you could drag your feet for a year trying to build up a cloud solution if you don't have the right people involved and actually bought into this. It has to be an organizational wide approach.
Got it. I think that we have 10 minutes? Yeah, fine.
Yeah, Lisa's on for questions.
Okay, so I do have a couple of more things, but let's see if we have any questions from the audience on what we've discussed so far.
Oh, got in the back there.
On lots of hands.
Uh-oh, hold on.
So data is collected by processes, and so you have collection points as you're going across the processes. So in the work that you're doing, are you working with the transformation team or the business process team to fine tune those processes to make sure that you are collecting the correct data points?
It's and this is where there's politics, right? So if you're a finance person and then a marketing person comes over and say, hey, I want to access your data. You're like, why? Lots of questions start to arise. So again, just kind of doubling down what Kristian's been saying. It's a data culture, right? And building a relationship with those business units that are very protective of their data. Always need to have some sort of champion that owns the data itself, and really make sure that you get their buy-in. Makes the job so much easier.
And so that brings up a good question. How many of you actually have a chief data officer? Just a few. You typically just for larger organizations, but I'm just curious there. Great question. Thank you. Was there another question?
Any questions from here? Yeah.
I'm curious how you would handle a situation where you're responsible for creating the data lake or whatever the case may be, but your sources of information are external.
Mm-hmm.
What approaches do you use to standardize the data, or however, to get that process going?
Yeah, the beauty of it is, there's been so many advances in technology that, there are warehouses now where they have masking capabilities. So think HIPAA information, right? You're collecting from insurance providers. So you can mask out social securities, identification information. So from a technology standpoint, you can really curate and keep the data compliant. So that you're not in violating any regulations. And that just comes into having a good partner, good either consulting firm, help you set that up on the front end, or, working with your vendor that has experience with that. But from an external standpoint, that's the beauty of these warehouses now. There are, there's a lot of open platforms where you can just grab data. There's Nielsen data, right? So Nielsen, they sell some anonymized data on all of us in the room. So a lot of the media companies, think Disney, think Hulu, they're collecting that information, correlating it, and that's all third-party information. But I think that's where the real value is especially with, we haven't touched on today, but the privacy controls that Apple's updated. All these companies are scrambling and trying to figure out, okay, we don't have this identifying data anymore. How do we figure out, Colin's Colin? So they're having to navigate and use different third-party pieces of information to really correlate and figure out, fine-tune their analysis. Yeah.
And that's an interesting point, because not all the data may come from your own company. A lot of it may come from the industry or from government sources and other sources. And you may not always have reliable access to that data.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, one last thing to add is that some of these warehousing companies also have what they call data marketplaces, where, again, you can just easily just point and click at it, right? You can say, I want this and this and this, and then they'll share that with you, readily available.
Is there any questions from the Zoom participants, by the way? Maybe you can raise your hand in the icon, because I think TJ's probably muted you all, I imagine. Oh, okay.
Well, the good news is nobody fell asleep. That's good.
Yeah, how do you know there's Very good.
Oh, all right.
All right, let's keep going.
All right, so we talked a lot about data and architecture and so forth, but when it comes right down to it, what's the best way to financially justify doing this? Okay, because when you stand in front of the business manager and you go, here's what I want to do, and it's going to do all these miraculous things. I mean, what does it take to make that happen?
Yeah. I think number one is focusing on a business problem that really impacts financials, whether it's revenue, gaining revenue or losing revenue. Always tying the business case to that. Make it easy, very consumable. Again, these are very complex solutions on the back end. So the best way to really pitch this to a line of business owner, this type of solution is just keep it simple. Focus on the business problem. Here's how much it costs. Here's how much we're going to save or make the company money. But I just like to keep it as simple as possible. If they do have questions, obviously you got to dig into the particulars, but try to keep it very consumable.
Great. And so you can start off small and then show the value there, do a quick win and grow it.
Correct.
Right? Thank you. Any other final questions?
We got a.
Yeah, you earlier you were talking about different architectures. You talked on the data lake, and then you talked about enterprise data warehouse. What about the data lake house? Can you define that, and then what problem is that solving?
Yeah, so there are a few data lake houses out there, and they do both. They have the ability to do low-cost storage, and they also have the ability to transform and model data into a form that the business can consume and query against with whatever given analytic solution that they plan to use. And as far as the overall stack today, right, you'll have your source systems, whether they're internal or external. Typically, you'll have a data pipelining and transformation tool, like something like an extract, load, and transform tool. That'll come into the lake or the lake house, right, or just the warehouse. And then you'll have your front end facing applications that your data analysts, your scientists might use.
So it's basically a hybrid solution. Right. How common is that? How common are, in your experience, are the data warehouses versus the lakes versus the hybrid?
I'd say still the most common scenario is you'll have something like an Azure data lake, and then you'll have something like a Snowflake BigQuery or Redshift or Databricks sitting on top of that Azure data lake. And Azure, just as an example, right? They also have the Amazon and the Google variations of those, but that's still the most common. I'd say we are probably moving towards a more hybrid where folks will find that you can actually just do both by consolidating onto a single data lakehouse platform. And with companies like Snowflake and Databricks seeing a lot of prominence and strength in the market, it's validating to that lakehouse strategy.
Looks like we have a question from Mark. Can you unmute yourself, Mark?
Yep. Actually, I have two questions. The first one is, how do you deal with data lake and analytics sprawl? Because it's something that we're dealing with right now. Once you get people who can build their own Power BI dashboards, it seems as though that there's one in every region, there's one in every business unit. So how do you deal with that? And then secondly, how do you deal with more granular permissioning? Because a lot of these data warehouses and a lot of these don't have the same level of data security like you would have, for example, in an SAP environment where you go down a row level, field level. In some cases, it's all or nothing when it comes to some of these data.
Yeah, definitely fair point. I'll say that on the lake and the warehouse side, there are pretty significant abilities to now do row level and column level security based on, say, a user that's accessing that data. That does require setup, right? It's not just going to be an out of the box. You actually have to someone go in and write the statements to create those grants. And then same thing, say on you mentioned Power BI and sprawl. We see that a lot with, especially with more traditional business intelligence systems. Every solution, at least the ones that I'm more familiar with, Power BI, Tableau, Sigma, obviously, have some ability to do very granular permissions from a governance perspective. So it really comes down from a process, right? You have to make sure that not everyone can just throw the kitchen sink at your Power BI, because that is going to end up in the sprawling situation that you mentioned, Mark. But as long as you lock it down from the beginning, and that's why, like Steve mentioned, starting small is also a good place, because then you can grow organically from there, rather than saying, here's all the data, you can now do whatever you want with it. There still has to be some layer of process.
Yeah, and I think to add on what Kristian said, the main challenge, one of the main challenges with the cloud is what Mark mentioned. So it's authentication. So validating, Kristian is Kristian, and that he has the rights to access this data set. A lot of it's a lot less pain if you do a lot of that hierarchy up front of who can access what. If you do it on the fly, you get in trouble. You're down the road, you just have so much content, you have so many different roles within the organization of who can access what. But the beauty of it, because you have all this user behavior data, usually in your cloud data warehouse, we'll typically go in with our customers and look at their dashboards or their visualizations and just their overall organization. And this again kind of ties back to culture and say, okay, hey, we have this user over here. They logged into the analytics platform one time and didn't log in for a month later. Maybe it was enablement. Maybe they didn't understand how to use the platform. So maybe we need to just do some enablement with them. So figuring out and just looking at how folks are interacting with your platform. Hey, we have Simon over here. He created 100 pieces of content that he's only looked at one time. Why are we collecting all that data? Let's make sure that we're only keeping the high value resources in our platform.
One more quick comment. If you're not using single sign-on today for authorization and authentication, you definitely should, especially because a lot of single sign-on providers have what's called, I think, system cross-identity management built in that will allow a user to log into your data warehouse, log into your analytics platform, and then they'll be consistent across platforms seeing the same data. So just that's a quick note too on the.
Security is a basic component of any architecture, right? And needs to be built in from the first. Single sign-on, multi-factor authentication of the combination of both knowledge and biometrics are critical in this day and age. And there's a lot of tools out there, right? To take a look at data, take a look at content, and begin to classify it so it's not so much a manual process. And if you're a small company that really can't afford a full-time development team, you start off small, you bring in somebody to give something that provides value, and then you let that value pay for further investments. You let that guide you, okay? If you're a bigger company, you think in terms of bigger capacity, bigger capability jumps, right? But most small businesses will build from the ground up. And now, because of the cloud, what you're saying is that they have access to enterprise tools for a fraction of the cost of it as it would be to set it up on their own. Excellent.
Yeah, the one thing I would watch out for, Steve, because I've seen this as well, right? So there's some really advanced technology out there. We have, we've grown leaps and bounds over the past couple of years for machine learning, for modeling. There's a lot of open source community is vibrant, and there's just so many cool solutions out there. But especially if you're a small shop and you go down that road of trying to develop these tools from the ground up, you could run into a lot of challenges, right? If the person that built that leaves the company, you're in a boatload of trouble. So I always try to steer even large enterprises I work with. Don't try to reinvent the boat, right? There's vendors like Sigma. We invest tons of money in R&D to make these solutions better. So if you have the option, go the vendor route, in that way you get support, training, enablement. So that you have a wider range of employees that you can go hire because they have a bigger knowledge base out there in the ecosystem. So I would always urge people, unless you're one of these Fortune 500s that can throw 30 developers on one problem to go solve it. If you're a small company, definitely try to use some of those vendor-led approaches.
So we have one final question from our institutional memory, also known as Michael Spiller.
You've talked a lot about the semi-technical aspects of this in terms of verbiage and where we're going. I mean, we didn't get down into, bits and bytes, but at the same time, how do you get to, especially today with having gone through 2 years of COVID, how do you get to the CEO who's willing to put out this money for what he sees as a totally new idea, and maybe the culture of the company is not to go that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think obviously it's been challenging 2 years business-wise for every organization. One like solid use case, actually, Kristian and I, we work with very large real estate firm. So it's a commercial real estate firm over in Australia, one of the biggest in the country. And they've traditionally not been a technology company, but their CEO, after COVID started, said, "Hey, I realized that we need to figure out new revenue streams," and invested a ton of money in infrastructure and people, brought in a new chief data officer to really build it out. So I think the companies that invest in building out their data practices now are going to come out on top in a couple of years down the road. But it's all led, I think, by the business use case. So trying to build a solution that can create new revenue or reduce the amount of capital expense. I think that those are the two levers that really have to focus on to get a C-level's attention to buy in on this type of program.
And there's been plenty of opportunity lately too. Massive changes in the market, regulations, the challenges of COVID. Each one of those impediments also represents an opportunity. I think I'll close with that.
Very good. Excellent. Well, what a great discussion. Yeah. And the thing is, this is just tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, there is so much we could discuss here, and you get the opportunity because next week there is there's one of our discussion groups that's going to talk about this, right? So it's on the 26th. Yeah, do take the time to attend. They're really good events. It's kind of more social. We just meet by Zoom, but it gives us a chance to talk about what we've heard in this session today, right? So I want to thank Kristian, Zach, Steve. Terrific job. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks once again for looking after us this evening. I really appreciate it. Just want to say, be safe. Have a safe trip back. Do feel free to stick around to ask some questions of these guys or just meet each other. Thanks, guys, for joining on Zoom. Really appreciate it. We hope to see you in person if you can possibly do that. I know Mark was, detained. It wasn't planned, right? He was actually going to be here until like today or yesterday. So anyway, again, we're going to be here next month. I've already thought of a couple of changes I'd like to make it even better. We're actually going to make the audio a little bit better next time as well although I think for the room, it was okay, right? Yeah.
And thank you, Bob, for the equipment.
Yeah. Bob is our chief audio visual guy. Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. Anyway, safe journey home. Thank you so much. See you again next month.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.